Tonight, and good to have some folks back from Alaska. Good to see you guys. Good to see you back. And we got a big show tonight.
We've been waiting to talk about this for like 2 or 3 weeks.
At least. So we're going to go full board tonight. We're, again, for those just watching on the internet tonight, Prophecy Focus Global Update. And, of course, you can feel free to text in questions or comments, and we will attempt to get to them. And it is September 22nd, 7 p.m. Central Time, and we will be on till 8 p.m. Again, for those watching or even folks that are right here, if you have questions or comments afterwards, always feel free to text them in, and you can call me after 8 p.m., but not before. We can't take the phones while we're doing this, but we'll be happy to answer questions as always. All right, so as we like to say, we're coming to you from Union Grove Baptist Church in Union Grove, Wisconsin, about a half an hour south of the Milwaukee area. So it's a tri-county area, Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, all within an easy driving distance. Well, good to see you, Josh.
Good to see you. Good
and
to be here.
What you been up to?
Since last week?
Yeah.
Just living life.
Living life?
Yeah.
That sounds, I don't know what it sounds like.
I think it sounds good, but
all right.
You can take it
well,
however
good.
you want.
I'll take it. I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
All right. Somebody was watching us the other day, and they wrote it, and they said, hey, I saw you guys talking up front, and I don't think that was supposed to be on the internet.
Oh.
And I said, oh, yeah. I said, we got nothing to hide.
What's the word that we're folksy?
Yeah, we have folksy.
Folksy.
Folksy, being a little folksy.
That's the first word I learned from Pastor Rich when he came here.
We done do some folksying. So, anyway, before we do too much folksying, tell the folks a little bit about what you do here and your passions and whatever else you got, and we'll fire this up and get into it.
All right. Well, I don't know about my passions, but
like for work, your children, your wife, that kind of thing.
All right. So
wow.
I'm Josh. I'm the music director here and get to do some teaching as well and get to do this on Wednesday nights. And so our family is part of the church, and we're just serving the Lord and continuing to move forward. So.
All right. I'm Pastor Rich, pastor at Union Grove Baptist. And again, we've been talking about prophecy now all summer. Of course, we have a ministry called Prophecy Focus Ministries. You can get us on prophecyfocus.org for the prophecy ministry items. And of course, also lines up with our internet site right here at Union Grove Baptist Church in Union Grove, Wisconsin. By the way, there's a couple of different Union Grove Baptist churches out there.
There's a few different ones.
Yeah,
actually.
This one's in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Make no mistake. All right, so we're going to have a special edition tonight for the remaining time, about 55 minutes. And I've been wanting to spend some time talking about what has been a real passion for me, which is Israel and specifically the Temple Mount and the importance of what's taking place. So we're going to talk rather rapidly here once we get rolling because there's so much material. We're going to do as you say, drinking through a fire hydrant once we get rolling. But you'll at least get a lot of concept ideas of things that are taking place. And we're going to start with an interesting issue, which is the Red Heifer. How many of you know that the Red Heifer is an important thing to the Jewish folks? All right, so probably a little better than half. So we're going to talk a bit about this, the times, and again, you'll see on our slides where this information comes from. It's actually, the Red Heifer thing is not out there quite as much as it was a few years ago, but let's read through this, talk a little bit about it, and then we'll tie in what this has to do with the prophetic picture.
All right, so pictured here is one of the red Angus bulls born at the Temple Institute's farm at an undisclosed location in Israel. The Temple Institute is a 28-year-old organization that has built more than 70 artifacts that can be used when a third temple is built. Its latest project is to import frozen embryos from red Angus cattle in the United States to create a herd of kosher red heifers in Israel. People have this understanding that the red heifer is something otherworldly or it is really rare, explained Rabbi Chaim Richmond. Chaim, thank you. Chaim Richmond, the international director and co-founder of the Temple Institute. But really, there are hundreds or even thousands of red-colored cattle of different species that would qualify. What has made a modern-day red heifer an impossibility thus far lies in this description in the book of Numbers, chapter 19. This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord hath commanded, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke. Cows that are raised on commercial dairy farms are subjected to all sorts of blemish-causing conditions, including ears pierced with a number tag, cuts or bruises from roughhousing with other cows or contact with broken fences, and ulcers from ingesting metal accidentally mixed into cheap cattle feed. Even a vaccination...
Even a what?
Vaccination.
I mean, I couldn't believe that word was in there, but go ahead.
Okay. Even a vaccination could count as a blemish. Additionally, cows on commercial farms are used for work, which that is forbidden according to the red heifer criteria. Ultimately, in order for there to be a kosher red heifer, it must be arranged from birth, explained Richmond. The animal must be supervised, watched, and cared for.
All right, so here's what we have. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the red heifer issue because to the Jewish Orthodox people, this is a huge issue. We're going to explain why from Scripture in just a moment. So the Jewish people, specifically the Orthodox Jewish people, a lot of the Hasidim, which are the ultra-Orthodox people, they're looking for this perfect red heifer that has to be sacrificed because the ashes are a very important part of the sacrificial system and the cleansing, if you will, of multiple things, which we'll get into in a moment. So you got a picture here. This is literally how it goes. You got a rabbi, he's got a heifer in front of him, and they literally go through hair by hair looking if there's more. I believe it's 2 hairs in their opinion, and it's basically the heifer is useless, can't use it. So the heifer itself, it's not like, well, it's going to make a nice, no, this heifer is going to be killed. It's going to be sacrificed, and the ashes are going to be used, if you will, according to Jewish law, actually Old Testament law. So the Mosaic law really did have a part in this, and back in the Old Testament times, this was a huge deal. So here you see a researcher with the Temple Institute examines one of the red cows born from imported frozen embryos to ensure the cow does not have any white or black hairs, which would render it impure. Can you imagine the tediousness of this? I mean, it's just amazing what they go through to try and make sure they have a kosher heifer. And then you heard all those different requirements. I mean, on any farm, the chances of 90% of those things having at least one thing that went wrong is quite significant. So it's a very, very tedious, long process. Let's go to Numbers 19, and we're going to look at why the Jewish people, again, these are not Christian Jews. These are Orthodox Jewish individuals that honestly believe this has to take place as part of the third temple. We'll talk about that in a minute.
All right. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect and on which a yoke has never come. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp, and it shall be slaughtered before him. And Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times directly in front of the tabernacle of meeting.
Okay, let me stop you there. This is going back to before the first and the second temple in the Jerusalem period. So when he's talking about the tabernacle, if you remember, when the Jewish people were traveling from Egypt heading to the promised land or Israel, they had that movable tabernacle. So that's what he's talking about here when he uses the word tabernacle. The tabernacle, once King David settled Jerusalem in about 960 BC is when the first temple was built. So the tabernacle was the movable temple, if you will, before the temple, the permanent temple was actually built. Go ahead, sorry.
All right. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Its hide, its flesh, its blood, and its offal shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet and cast them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer. Then a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and store them outside the camp in a clean place. And they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for the water of purification. It is for purifying from sin. And the one who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean till evening. It shall be a statute forever to the children of Israel and to the stranger who dwells among them.
All right, so the Jewish person is reading this. How long is the statute to be good for? Forever. All right, that means it didn't stop when the tabernacle went down. It didn't stop during the first and second temple. This is something that they want to keep literally forever. So taking it literally, just as we would as Christians in our New Testament doctrine. Go ahead.
All right. Verse 17, and for an unclean person they shall take some of the ashes of the heifer burnt for purification from sin, and running water shall be put on them in a vessel. A clean person shall take hyssop and dip it in the water, sprinkle it on the tent, on all the vessels, on the persons who are there, or on the one who touched a bone, the slain, the dead, or a grave. The clean person shall sprinkle the unclean on the third day and on the seventh day. And on the seventh day he shall purify himself, wash his clothes, bathe in water, and at evening he shall be clean.
All right, so here's the issue. The issue is simply this. This is a major piece of Jewish doctrine. So when those of you that watch Jewish news or maybe listen to the prophetic picture and so forth, every time you hear about the red heifer, it's a seriously important issue to our Jewish friends. So this is a continual ongoing process of the Orthodox Jews trying to find this perfect red heifer. Now, going back a little bit, when we started, we talked about the Temple Institute. We're going to be showing you a bunch of pictures from them in just a minute about those 70 artifacts that have been made. So again, I like to bring this up that I've had the privilege of being in Israel about 10 different times now, and we always take the groups to, or if I'm with another tour group, they always take us to a place called the Temple Institute. We're going to walk you through a little bit of that in just a few moments from a pictorial analysis. But the Temple Institute, run by Chaim Richmond, is just an absolutely unbelievable place that is preparing for the third temple. It's coming. All right? So we'll get into that in a little bit. So there's this search for the red heifer. That's just one piece of a massively big picture as we look for the third temple to come. Now, I want you to take a look at this picture because, quite frankly, this picture it's not a well-known concept. So if you look on the picture, if you look way down where that ramp is running, what's at the other end of the ramp? Anybody got an idea? What does it look like? It looks like the temple, and that's exactly what it is. So we're looking at the Jewish temple. We're looking at a ramp that ran from the temple straight forward to the Mount of Olives. All right? And this is an extremely interesting, and we're going to have to spend an entire session on this one day. Historically, this isn't well known and it's not well documented, but this comes out of a Jewish archive, these pictures. And we'll get into this in the future, but this ramp was a real deal that actually went across the Kidron Valley into the Mount of Olives, and there's a whole lot of significance with that, which we're not going to get into today. What we're going to look at, though, is what's sitting on top of this, if you will, altar that's outside the temple. What is it? It's a red heifer. All right, so this is a Jewish painting rendition, if you will, of what took place back in the Old Testament, and it's the same thing in a different format, of course, a different optic that the Jewish people are looking to do as soon as it's possible. So there's just a little picture, again, the concept of the red heifer that would be burned, and those ashes would be a major part of the purification process in the future. So it's something the Jewish people are still looking for. All right, so again, if you want to text or text, I guess that's all they can do is text.
Yep.
Feel free to 414-788-6010. All right, let's go into the biblical concept now about the third temple. So we're going to go through about 4 different passages. Maybe, I might have 5 in this one that I put in there. I just completed this yesterday, and I can't remember what I did yesterday. Do you remember what you ate tonight?
Chicken.
Good for you. But you have chicken every night, though. Oh, it's cooked.
It was in the air fryer. It was really good.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Maybe next time.
All right. All right, so let's go to the key passages. So for the note takers, these are the key passages that absolutely prophetically point to there must be a third temple. The red heifer was just to, if you will, get your salivating glands going a little bit about the third temple. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. Again, Daniel 9, 24 to 27 are the key chronological passage of the prophetic calendar. You cannot understand prophecy if you don't understand Daniel 9, 24 to 27. Unequivocally the most important passage prophetically on God's prophetic timeline. We're just going to go to the one verse because of time, but we'll explain it. Again, you say, well, Daniel 9, verse 27. All right, we'll just fill in the blanks. We'll fill in the pronouns so you know exactly where we're going. I'm going to read it once, then I'll explain. Then he, the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant, basically a peace treaty, with many, with Israel, for 1 week or 7 years. But in the middle of the week, or after 3.5 years, he or the Antichrist shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Did you catch that? Is the sacrifice and offering going on in Jerusalem today? No. Why not? Because there isn't a temple. You can't sacrifice, can't have offerings without a temple. All right, remember, Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 was written about 500 BC. All right, and on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, speaking of the Antichrist, even till the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolator or Tor. All right, so what are we talking about here? Daniel 9:27 is future. It hasn't happened yet. After the rapture of the church, which is the next main event on God's prophetic calendar, the Antichrist will start the 7-year tribulation kicking by confirming a peace treaty with the Jewish people. Okay? Most of you are familiar with that. The context, it's like, well, who's he going to confirm it with? The many. Daniel was writing to whom? He was writing to the Jewish people. So the many is referring to the Jewish people, the Hebrew children of Israel. For 1 week, we've talked about that. And again, in prophetic language, Daniel's talking about a heptad, 7 of something. So when we're talking about 1 week, it has to be equal to something. Well, we've given you in past sessions, and we can't go through all the dating again, but every single week is equal to 7 years. This is the 70th week of Daniel we're talking about. So during that 70th week of Daniel, in the middle of it, or after 3.5 years, what's going to happen? He's going to put an end to the sacrifice and offering. Well, wait a minute. Is there a temple in Israel today? Is there a temple in Israel today? All right, thank you. The issue is, this tells us there's got to be a temple that's going to be built in Israel, in Jerusalem, or how are you going to stop the sacrifice and the offering? All right?
Can't do it.
You say, well, wait a minute. We could interpret that a bunch of ways. Well, I can't, but maybe someone else could. Well, let's get something more solid. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, the Olivet Discourse, when Jesus is preaching on the prophetic picture. Why don't you read this one?
All right. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand.
Well, let me see it. We just looked at Daniel the prophet. We just looked at the prophecy. And Jesus now, 500 years later, is saying there's going to be the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. What's the abomination of desolation? It is the defiling of the second temple. How about Mark chapter 13, verse 14?
So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing where it ought not, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
All right, so we're in the midst of the tribulation period, and we're going to go to Revelation in the next moment. Twice in Jesus' document, and there's going to be the abomination of desolation, which is the desecration of the third Jewish temple. 3 passages so far that absolutely there's got to be a third temple. Let's go to the Pauline epistle. What does Paul have to say?
2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
Wait a minute. Where's he going to sit? In the temple of God. When is that going to happen? Matthew tells us, Mark tells us, Daniel tells us, after 3.5 years, the Antichrist it'll be the false prophet, will set up an image, which we'll see in Revelation in just a moment. He will put it in God's holy temple. The Jewish people will be forced to leave. The Bible says they will be scattered, and if they don't flee, they will die in Jerusalem. Again, we like to go to Zechariah chapter 13, verses 8 and 9, which says, let's see how many remember. What percentage of all Jewish people, according to Zechariah 13, 8 and 9, they can look it up quick, what percentage of all Jewish people will die during that tribulation period? How many? 2/3 of all Jewish people will die during that time period. It's right there, black and white, Zechariah 13, 8 and 9. That means only 1/3 of the Jewish people will survive through the tribulation. Where will they survive? I'm going to preach on this in 2 nights on Sunday night. We're going to be looking at Revelation chapter 12, how God will protect the 1/3 of the Jewish remnant, where they're going to go, how he's going to care for them. That's in 2 weeks. We're right here, Unigrove Baptist. All right, so he's saying basically the people in Thessalonica, they were all upset. They were going through horrible persecution. And they were concerned that they were in the tribulation period. It was that bad. The persecution was that horrible. And they're like, Paul, we're going through the tribulation. Some of our people are being killed. Some of our people are being put in prison. Some of our people are being beat to death. I thought you told us we wouldn't be in the tribulation. And Paul says, well, I did tell you that. And he says, you know what? The tribulation does not start until the Antichrist comes on the scene and starts to do all these things that we prophetically talked about. By the way, and this is a very sobering thought. You watch the national news, you watch the global news. That's why this is called Prophecy Focus Global Update. I got word 2 days ago when I was sitting with one of my friends at dinner. He was talking to a rather, I call it a mega church in Minnesota. And they have 20 missionaries that were past tense in Afghanistan. Were. You say, oh, great, they got put on a plane and got taken out of there. It's not the word I got. The word he got from the pastor in Minnesota was that every single one of them and their families were martyred. Wow. Now, folks, that gets your attention. And what you heard on the news from making deals with terrorists, if that report is true, which I have no reason to doubt that it's true, their churches were burned and the missionaries were slaughtered. Now, folks, you say, well, do you have absolute documentation? Well, outside of going to Afghanistan and doing an in-person report, which I'm not about to do because I'd never make it through the border. But if that report is true, and I'll leave a little caveat there, it's horrific. And that's exactly the opposite of what was told our media what would take place in Afghanistan. Well, of course, we're going to let all people in and we'll have all the face and we're open to Christians, and the churches end up burned. You think about that. Are you going to force me to go here?
Yes.
All right. So, right before I walked in here tonight, and again, there's criminals everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are. 2 Afghan refugees charged with federal crimes while at Fort McCoy. One little 6-year-old girl was raped, and one wife was strangled, suffocated. Apparently she lived. She didn't, according to the report, she didn't die. Wow. And then the very next line is, and I'm just going to read it without comment. I guess I can't. Basically, Representative Glenn Moore wants to know why they're being poorly treated at Fort McCoy.
Wow.
I have nothing else to say on that. Revelation chapter 11, go ahead.
All right. Then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. But leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it. For it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months.
Revelation chapter 11. Now, Revelation chapter 4 through Revelation chapter 22 is all prophetic. Not one word has been fulfilled yet. Now, Josh, as I like to say, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, I'm not the best guy on the earth when it comes to math.
I no comment.
All right, well, I like a guy who pleads the fifth on occasion, especially when it's going to incriminate me.
It's safer.
Yeah, it's true. So let's see. Between Revelation chapter 4 and Revelation 22, my math, I think I can get this right. Revelation chapter 11 is somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
All right, so it's during the tribulation period. Actually, what Paul is, or the Apostle John, he's saying, listen, John, here's what I want you to look at. And this is all prophecy. He's looking at the future, and he's like, it's basically here. Pretend, if you will, take a rod, and I want you to measure the third temple. How long is it going to be in place at the bottom there when the Gentiles are going to be trampling the Jewish people? How long? 42 months. Does that match up with 3.5 years from Daniel? Well, absolutely. Isn't it amazing that every single prophetic word from Genesis all the way to Revelation, all 66 books, everything fits hand in glove perfectly. Let's go to one more. Revelation chapter 13.
And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
All right, so the person that's talking here in Revelation 13, there's the satanic trinity. We start out, we're talking about Satan, who empowers the Antichrist, or the first beast. Then we get down to the middle of the chapter, and we talk about another beast, which is identified later in Revelation as the false prophet. So the satanic trinity, Satan, the beast or the Antichrist mimics God the Son. Satan, of course, mimics God the Father. And the third person of the satanic trinity, the false prophet, who mimics the Holy Spirit. So the satanic false prophet then, middle of the tribulation, says he deceives those who dwell on the earth by what? He's going to be doing fantastic signs. He's going to get people's attention. They're satanically empowered. What will he do? He'll telling those on the earth to make an image to the beast. All right? So the people are around. It's like, what can we do for you? And he says, I want you to make an image. Now, several weeks ago, probably a month ago, I brought in a video of this gigantic, I forget, a 20, 30 story thing that's being taken around the country, and basically it's a giant computer type screen, but the thing moves, it talks, it sings, it does whatever, and you plug into it what you want. I honestly believe it's a prototype, not the real deal, but a prototype of exactly what this beast is going to be, this image that will be put into the temple. The bottom line, he says what? He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, cause as many who not worship the image of the beast to be what? Killed. All right? So, folks, all these things point to there's got to be a third temple. We just went through about 6 different passages that back that up. All right, so here's where we're going to go rapid fire now. We're going to take you to the Temple Institute in Israel. Again, I strongly, if you want to know what's going on in Israel, you've got to know about the templeinstitute.org. It is the best resource of what's happening in Israel. The rabbis that are there, again, not Christians, these are Orthodox rabbis that are making things happen in Israel. You're going to see things, I've seen everything literally that you're going to see on the screen, the pictures and so forth, all these artifacts that they've remade, they've duplicated them, they're in place, they're ready to roll, the third temple is ready to be built. Who can tell me why the third temple isn't built yet? What's the problem? Thank you. The Dome of the Rock is sitting on the Temple Mount. Now, folks, if there's videos that are out there that are stating, in my opinion, extremely bad information regarding where the third temple is going to be located. The Holy of Holies has to be in one spot, and I'm going to show you where that spot is tonight in color. It is the top of Mount Moriah on what is known as, through Jewish names, as the foundation stone. Now, I want to take an honest survey. So if you know what the foundation stone is, I really would like you to raise your hand. How many actually know what the foundation stone is? Look at that. See, we don't teach this stuff. This is key. Thanks, Paul. I only had to recognize one person out of our whole group. All right, so you're going to find out what the foundation stone is tonight. All right, so the Temple Institute, here's things that, and here's a picture of the entrance to it. Now it's a new building. Those of you that traveled to Israel maybe prior to about 7 years ago, the Temple Institute was in a different building. They've now, and of course through Christian donations, Jewish donations, this is in the old city of Jerusalem. It's a beautiful center now, and much security is there because these are very, very precious items which will be put in the third temple. Now, you jump in, anything you got?
Okay. I got a question right away.
Yeah.
So I have heard some people say that they think that the structure of the third temple will be more of a tabernacle style building than an actual brick and mortar kind of. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Absolutely, because the Jewish people have got the stuff ready to roll.
Okay.
So it's not going to be a tent. It's not going to be that. All right. So Chaim Richmond again. He's the Jewish rabbi. That's one of the two major heads. Rabbi Isaiah, and I can't remember the other part of his name. What they have, and they've made this statement, and it's on their website. If tomorrow the Jewish people were given control over the Temple Mount, and they have control over the Temple Mount, but they will not exercise that control because they're afraid of starting a war with the Muslims and having such a massive outpour against Israel that it would wipe out Israel. That's their concern. Well, guess what? Ezekiel 38 and 39 makes it very clear that there's going to be the war of Gog and Magog, which is going to happen right after the rapture. That war is going to take place. It tells us in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that the entire hills around Jerusalem will be overcome with all the nations that surround her. And it tells you what the nations are. We've gone through that, and again, that's a previous time that we've gone through. Ezekiel tells us what happens when all those nations, and I don't mean to be unkind, it's just a biblical fact. The Muslim nations are going to rise up, and God says he's going to destroy them as they attack Israel. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that the temple can come down, or the Dome of the Rock can come down, because the Muslims will be basically made impotent, if you will, and the Jewish people will be able to build that third temple. The Antichrist is going to jump on that and say, hey, the Jewish people for over 2,000 years have been looking to get that third temple built. Build it. The Dome of the Rock will come down. How's it going to come down? You know how? maybe a Scud missile, maybe a missile that misses, maybe the I don't know. But it's got to come down. The third temple has to go up in the exact location. Tony?
Are the huge stones that go in the temple, are they all cut and hewed?
They were. Yes, every single stone that was built for the foundation for the temple, they were cut in quarries outside the camp because they didn't want any noise or any defilement on those things when they were putting them up. So I mean, if you go there, it's absolutely amazing. There are stones that are 40 feet long on temple foundation that have to weigh, I don't know the exact weight, but they're hundreds of tons. How they moved those in ancient times, if you will, to get those in place and get them down. I mean, there's video of how they think it would happen, but it's just an amazing thing. It's marvelous.
They're all cut now. They're ready to
I have not seen all of them. I am presuming that a guy named Gershom Solomon and some others that are part of what's called the temple faithful have those things hid somewhere. So they have the foundation stone ready to go that they brought to the Temple Mount already. It's on video. So, yeah, I mean, this thing is set and ready to go. I skipped through something. The bottom line is Chaim Richmond stated this: if the Jewish people had full authority over the Temple Mount, they would immediately bring the altar. I'll show you a picture of the altar in a minute, the practice altar, if you will. It'll immediately be rolled in front of the Temple Mount. They will immediately start the sacrificial system. while they are building the third temple. So the altar is ready to go. They'll bring that in first. Then the Dome of the Rock somehow is disappeared or will disappear. The temple will be raised while they're in the midst of doing the sacrificial system. And again, some of you are saying, well, why are they returning the sacrificial system? They are not Christians. They are not believers in the Messiah that we know. So they're returning back to the Old Testament ritual ways. All right, let's zip through this. I don't want to run out of too much time. So this is basically what the second temple, after Herod the Great cleaned it up, would have looked something like this. Massive building, some 20-plus stories tall, the big altar out front. Remember, the temple is there to sacrifice to God. Inside that building is, and you go through two different sections to get to the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies is the most sacred place during the first temple period. Who was in the Holy of Holies in the first temple period? God was. The Shekinah glory of God was in there. Ezekiel tells us that when the Jewish people had unfortunately rebelled against God, the Shekinah glory basically goes out the front of the temple, takes off, and has not returned. You say, well, during the second temple period, did the Shekinah glory ever enter the temple? No. Will the Shekinah glory enter the third temple? No. You say, why? Because it is not a temple that honors Jesus Christ. When will God enter the temple? Number 4. First temple's gone, second temple's gone, third temple is the tribulation temple, which is not a, if you will, a temple built by believers in the Lord. The fourth temple, where do we know about the fourth temple? Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48 discusses the fourth temple. That is the temple that Jesus Christ himself, when he returns to this earth, Revelation 19:11 to 21, will come, commit the battle of go do the battle of Armageddon. The Bible tells us the brancher, Jesus, will build the fourth temple himself. Then he will enter into the temple, and God will once again be in the temple. But it's not until we get to the fourth temple. All right. You getting all this? You got this? It only took me 40 years to get it. So good for you. If you got one night, they're doing good.
Yeah.
Took me a long time. All right. Take a look at that. That's a rendition of what? The thing with the two angels on it. What's that called? Ark of the Covenant. Who knows where the Ark of the Covenant is? No takers. The best thing we know is that after the first temple period, that a bunch of priests potentially, but can't be documented, took the Ark of the Covenant, which is very sacred, a very sacred piece of furniture to God, and they took it down way below into the catacombs beneath the Temple Mount, and many of us believe that it is probably there to this day. Can we prove it? No. You know why we can't prove it? Because there were 3 rabbis, and this is not a joke, there were 3 rabbis that went down into the temple stairway to get down into the catacombs, and guess who met up with them? The Muslims. And again, this is for real. The Muslims saw them. The rabbis honestly believed they were getting down to the section where potentially the Ark of the Covenant was stored. The Muslims stopped them. I have seen it. It is a massive wall that has been built up, made out of, I mean, it's not like plywood and stuff. We're talking massive stones that have been mortared into place. You can't get in there anymore. So if the Ark is still there, that is speculation as to where it probably is. All right, here's some Jewish priests. This actually, if you look to the left of the screen, you'll see benches there. I've sat on those benches, as have many other folks. This is a basic a practice altar for the priests. These are real priests you're looking at here. They go there, they practice, they're getting ready for that third temple. So here you see, and again, the ceiling's low here. It's inside, but the priest is basically being taught exactly how you do every single thing. Has a very strong ritualistic effect to it. All right, These are the vessels that once were in the Jewish temple, but were destroyed, were taken by the Babylonians in one stretch in 586 BC, by the Romans in AD 70. All these things are gone. So the Temple Institute, this place that we're showing you pictures of, built these items. So this, by the way, is a massive brass laver. The priests will pour the water on their hands. They wash up before they go in. This is what's called the Mizrach. It's basically what catches the blood at the altar. You'll notice at the bottom it has a point on it. When the priests take it, they cannot set the blood down, else it will coagulate. So there's a point on there, and they don't walk around with the stand. They'll just have the Mizrach, they'll get the blood, and they need to pour it in the right places and so forth. And I'm just going to go through these. So these are all vessels that have been made, all different things. It would take us 2 hours to go through them all. So I'm just going to quickly go through them. I love this copper. These are all massive things, by the way, most of them. Shovels for ashes made out of silver. Others, all out of precious metals. By the way, as we go through these, here's a little bit of commentary. When the Romans finally came in and plundered the second temple and took all of these things, do these things have value? Yes? No?
Yeah.
They're precious metal. Why did the Romans come in and steal all this stuff? Because what had happened to Rome just shortly before AD 70 when they destroyed Jerusalem? What happened to Rome? It burned down. What do you need to build Rome back? Show me the money, brother. And the Romans came in under General Titus. They plundered the second temple, took all these artifacts. Why did they take... Jesus said, Matthew chapter 24, verse 2, not one stone will be left upon another that will not be cast down. He said that in about AD 30. AD 70, the Romans come in 40 years later. What do? They knock the temple down. They set it on fire. They start pushing the stones aside. Why did they do that? What was all over these stones? Gold, silver, precious metals, marble. The Romans came in. They had to take apart every single stone, just like Jesus prophesied they would, same as Daniel prophesied they would in Daniel 9:26, 500 years earlier. They had to get the money to bring back to Rome so they could help rebuild it. Isn't it amazing how all history works towards what God says is going to happen? I stopped moving my finger. Let your fingers do the walking. All right. Oil pitchers. I got to stop here for a minute. This is a beautiful giant candelabra. The candelabra is about the height. I'm about 6 feet tall, somewhere in that range. It sits outside in this protected case in the old city of Jerusalem. It's now sitting in front of a newer synagogue in the old city. Massive, beautiful menorah that the Jewish people, the artisans, have built. Where's that going to go? In the third temple. The Temple Institute's got everything set and ready to go. More menorahs, incense pots, the table of showbread. Most of us don't have a clue what the table of showbread is. So the loaves of bread were baked fresh. That was put in there, and then when they were changed, the history tells us, admit a little bit of legend maybe, that when they would take out the old loaves and they would push them through, they wouldn't touch them, but they would push them through these racks, and it was a sweet savor to God. It is stated that when those loaves came out later, they were still as warm as the moment they were put in, that God preserved them. And of course the priests then were able to eat them after they were taken out. The altar of incense to bring a sweet smell to God. The crowns for the priests. All these things are made. The temple garments are all made. The horns are all made. The shofars are ready to go. The beautiful harps are all made. Rabbi Kahana, I'll just remember his first name. Rabbi Kahana basically came in during our last generation and built all of the harps that were needed for the temple. Amazing. All there. All right, so we get down to this. This is going to happen. That picture that you see up there, that will be what the second or the third temple will look like. I strongly believe that. Because why? Because the Jewish people have it ready. They've got the plans. They know what they're looking for. It's going to be rebuilt, which is the main reason why I don't see it as being a tabernacle. It will be a full-blown third temple that the Jewish people will raise up. Here's kind of a modern look at what it may look like, but just beautiful, gorgeous, massive, and one day it's going to happen. All right, let's go into our next section and start talking about the foundation stone. So I've been talking a long time. I'm running out, man.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll take over. Jewish tradition holds that the current Temple Mount is the site where God gathered the dust to create Adam.
What'd you say? Say what? Go through that again.
It's Jewish tradition that the current Temple Mount is the site where God gathered the dust to create Adam.
Now, where would you come up with a fable like that?
Off of your slide.
That's good. I like that. You're absolutely right. Where were Adam and Eve created? The Garden of Eden. This is underneath, you're looking at a picture inside of the Dome of the Rock. Where does the Dome of the Rock sit again? In what place? Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, in the same exact place that the first and the second temple stood. Now, I'm going to blow some folks away with this. So I'm listening to Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, and he's talking about a little encounter that he had. And he's in Israel. He's at the Temple Mount, and he's talking to Chaim Richman, believe it or not, same guy as the head of the Temple Institute. And he says to Chaim, we're talking a little bit about, it sounded like a song there for a minute. He's talking about the Temple Mount and what's there. And Chaim Richman makes this statement to Dr. DeYoung, and he says, well, you know, the foundation stone is underneath the Dome of the Rock. And Dr. DeYoung is like, what is he talking about? And he didn't want to admit he had no clue what he was talking about. So Dr. DeYoung goes home. He calls up Chaim later that day or the next day, whatever it was, and he's like, Rabbi, he's like, what did you mean about the foundation stone being under the Dome of the Rock? Are you saying, is that where Adam was created? And he says, well, of course, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Wow.
And Dr. DeYoung is like, what? Never heard that before. I go to Israel, and it's like, I got to find out if both these guys are legit or not at this point. It's like, I never heard that either. So I go and I start going through some Israel antiquities books. Sure enough, right there, the foundation stone where Adam was created.
Wow.
So you're saying now, it's like, well, wait a minute. Come on, Brother Rich. That would mean the Garden of Eden had to be in Jerusalem. And it's like, well, come on now. Everybody knows it was out in Mesopotamia somewhere. And I'm like, yeah. Well, you know what? We're going to do this probably next time because we don't have time, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser here. Where was the Garden of Eden? Well, you go back to Genesis and you go through and it talks about a river, singular, that broke out into 3 different heads. The Gishon, the Pishon, the Tigris, and Euphrates rivers. Everyone believes it's out in Mesopotamia because if you look on a map, you'll see the Euphrates River in Mesopotamia. You'll see the Tigris River. The Pishon River, does anybody have a map with the Pishon River on it today? And if you do, you just drew it because it doesn't exist. Then there's the Gihon River. Do you know where the Gihon River, where it starts from? Yeah, it starts from right underneath the temple. So, I've been to the tributary that comes out a little bit ways down the road from the temple, and there is a opening underneath there, of which a Navy SEAL went under and swam from the Gihon River outlet, which is very small, by the way, right now, and he traveled up and he got right underneath the Temple Mount. So the Gihon River, but wait a minute, where's the Pishon, the Euphrates? All these things, they don't line up. Well, guess what happened after all these things happened back in Genesis? There's a thing called the Genesis flood. Mm-hmm. The rest is history. So you say, well, I can't believe that the Garden of Eden was actually in Jerusalem. All right, that's fine. I'm serious about that. I'm not trying to make anybody believe that that's where it was. I'm fairly convinced that's where it was. We're going to get into that more in the future. But think about that. What's the first event here? The creation of Adam. Where does the last event on earth take place? Jerusalem. Where does all the tribulation main things happen? In Jerusalem. Where is Jesus going to set up his millennial throne? In Jerusalem. It's very much by coincidence if that's not where the first thing took place. So you're like, don't call me a heretic yet. I spent a lot of time researching this. I've gone through a ton of videos. Not a ton because there's not that many out there. I've gone through the Jewish, if you will, literature on these things. I've studied what others have said, like Jimmy DeYoung and so forth, who put out he's got a Return to Eden, an excellent DVD that's out, which really helps. You say, I don't get a dime or a penny for any of this stuff, but it's good stuff. All right, so we're going to run out of time, so I got to zip ahead here. You got something?
There is a question about the weapons and things in Revelation 13. It talks about the Antichrist being wounded with the sword. John mentions horses, medieval equipment. Do you think this means modern society and weaponry would be destroyed as we know it?
Yeah, actually, we talked about that last week a little bit, and it's very, I can't be dogmatic, but I think based on what's going to happen, the tremendous amount of destruction that's going to take, the amount of people that will die, the tremendous upheaval, the earthquakes and all the rest of the things, this earth is not going to look like it looks today. The resources aren't going to be there. There's going to be no money. There's going to be famine. Do I think that it's very probable that we are going to return back to, if you will, old-fashioned cavalry-type fighting? Very probable. All right, so here's a picture of the Dome of the Rock. Underneath that Dome of the Rock sits the foundation stone. Here's a little bit of a cutout view. So if you look in the middle of the picture, you'll see the foundation stone surrounded by what currently is the Dome of the Rock. Now, those that would deny that that's the foundation stone, they can put the temple anywhere they want it. But the Holy of Holies has to be at that spot. Then it's unequivocal. Archaeology shows it. Bible shows it, and those that say, well, no, the city of David is where the temple was, prove it. They can't. There's, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it makes no archaeological nor biblical sense based on it. But their arguments are good. They're very convincing, but not to me. All right. So here we are looking down, aerial view from the top of the Dome of the Rock, if you will, looking at the foundation stone. There are steps, by the way, on the side of this which are not shown, where you can go down into way down in the archives, except for what's been sealed off by our Muslim friends. What else happened on the top of Mount Moriah besides the foundation stone? How about Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac on the top of Mount Moriah? Isn't it amazing, again, that it all comes back to Mount Moriah? All right. By the way, did he sacrifice his son? No. God spared him and said, nope, thanks for your obedience, but no. All right, let's read this real quick.
Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. Then he said, take now your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.
All right, so what else happened there? King Solomon, according to the Bible, built the first temple of the Jews on the mountaintop 1000 BC. Basically at 960 BC is when it was built, only to have it torn down 400 years later in 586 by the Babylonians, all in Jerusalem. By the way, this article from the Smithsonian is the best historical article I have found that's concise and it's excellent. It's called What's Under the Temple Mount. It's put out by the Smithsonian Magazine. It's on the internet. It's free, this article. What's Under the Temple Mount by the Smithsonian Magazine. Absolutely phenomenal article. Okay, go ahead.
In the 1st century BC, Herod expanded and refurbished a second temple built by Jews who had returned after their banishment. It is here that, according to the Gospel of John, Jesus Christ lashed out against the money changers and was later crucified a few hundred yards away. The Roman general Titus exacted revenge against Jewish rebels, sacking and burning the temple in AD 70.
All right, so why are we doing the historical? We've gone through that there's got to be a third temple. We've gone through the Temple Institute showing us things that have been made ready for that temple. Now we're taking a quick look at the history of that Temple Mount. 960 to 586 BC, Temple 1. 515 BC to AD 70, Second Temple, all documentation. So the Second Temple would have looked something like, or Solomon's Temple, something like this. The next temple, or the Second Temple, is not as ornate. Herod would refurbish it in a big way. So from 586 to 515, the Jewish people are where? Daniel, where were the Jews? I gave it away. Where were the Jewish people, Babylon?
Babylon.
Babylon, right? All right. They were there because they failed to do the land Sabbaths for 70 different Sabbaths. God sent them off and put them in exile for 70 years. Under Cyrus, they come back 515 BC to AD 70. The Second Temple is there, but it was not very ornate. The Jewish people didn't like it. So what happened? Herod said, I need to make friends with the Jewish people. I got a bad rap with the Romans. They don't like me. So what am I going to do? How am I going to make them? Well, Herod was a master builder. He built many different massive edifices. He built this beautiful, gorgeous Second Temple. So that's the remodel of Herod's temple. Read this real quick, please.
Before work began on the temple, Herod spent 8 years stockpiling materials for its construction. Then a workforce of over 10,000 men began its construction, including a contingent of 1,500 specially trained priests, who were the only ones permitted to work on the innermost and holiest parts of the temple. Building continued for a further 20 years.
Good.
Herod's main rebuilding was completed before his death in 4 BC, where it continued for 60 years. When Jesus visited the temple at the Passover, the place had by then been under construction for 46 years. The work was not entirely finished until 63 AD, 7 years before the destruction of the entire temple in 70 AD.
All right, so I got 2 minutes left. I'm now going to take you to one of the most disgusting things that has happened in Israel. Take a look. You say, well, what is that? That is underneath the Temple Mount. That was known as Solomon's Stables. You see dump trucks and bulldozers down there. Hundreds and thousands of years of antiquities were in that section underneath the Temple Mount. The Muslims, without permission from the Israel Antiquities Association, decided they were going to build an underground mosque, took the bulldozers to it, took out 350 dump trucks of precious antiquities and dumped them up the road in what's known as the Kidron Valley. It caused an uproar, and should have caused an uproar. It's lucky it didn't cause a war. So here's the Dome of the Rock. If you look at in the front right of the structure is basically where that big platform next to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the pewter building, towards the front of the screen. Over on its right, angled a little bit, that is underneath. That's where that Solomon stable was, and that's where the 10,000 person Muslim mosque now is, after they tore out all the stuff, if you will, from the first and second temple period and dumped it up the street. So now what happened is called the Temple Mount Sifting Project, because, again, our Muslim friends said, nah, there's never been a Jewish presence here. None of this. It's all Muslim stuff. So they went in. They started to go through these 350 dump trucks worth of stuff, and it literally was a sifting project. These weren't massive things. The stuff was destroyed. So they pulled out coins and artifacts and all sorts of different things. This is the spot where they dumped the items then. They took it up to a place in the Kidron Valley, and they went through the sifting at Emek Zurim National Park. So you can see where the temple is. up in that bigger round section is where all this stuff was dumped, and this has been going on for multiple years now, pulling out these artifacts. Again, 9,000 tons of artifacts, along with dirt and everything else, got thrown up in this area that was taken out from that Temple Mount area. It's just a really disappointing thing. So all these every single artifact, thousands upon thousands, they're labeled, they're numbered, they're categorized, and they're put in display cases and so forth. Some of the tiles have been rebuilt to look at some of the ancient tiles as they existed during the first and second temple period. This is all documented. Absolute took place. All right, we're going to have to stop. We're out of time, but folks, here's what we know. There's going to be a third temple. I think 7 different passages of Scripture that documented. Ones I think is enough in the Bible because God never makes a mistake. 7 different passages. There's actually more that we can go to prove there's going to be a third temple. All the things needed for the third temple basically are in place. I could go through more, but I'm out of time. The bottom line is God's prophetic word will be fulfilled. Just as absolute as the first and the second temple were, just as absolute as the deportations of the Jewish people were, just as absolute as those prophecies were, when God said he's going to come in the future, could be today, could be tomorrow, to take his church, God's people home with him, it's going to happen. Just as sure as that happened, the battle of Gog and Magog will happen. Just as sure as that will happen, the Antichrist will make a peace treaty with the Jewish people. Just as surely as that's going to happen, the third temple will be built, the sacrifices will be reinstituted, and the rest is future. Close us out.
Father, we thank you for the time that we've had tonight to look at these things and from a biblical perspective and see what's going on. And Lord, we do look forward to seeing you and being with you. But until that time, Lord, please help us remember that right now we are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and you dwell within us, those that have trusted in your Son, Jesus Christ, for salvation. Lord, please help us to live that way and to be holy and to share that love with those that we come in contact with this week. In Jesus' name, amen.
30 seconds. Right here in the second group back is the Rollin family, part of it. These dear folks have been just an absolute blessing to me and to the church for several months that they've been able to be here. I am very, very disappointed, but very happy for them that they found a place in Florida that they'll be moving to, and this may be the last time we see them until they come back on vacation or we go invade their home. So Mike, Elizabeth, and your entire family, I love you guys dearly. I'm saddened you're going, but I'm very pleased and happy that the Lord's led you on. So if you know them, give them a hug before they go. If you're sick, don't touch them. But God bless you, folks. Love you, and trust the Lord will be watching over you. All right, folks, thanks so much. Have a great night. By the way, all your